In these days of streamlined division of labor, it is often impossible to tell what a factory produces just by watching individuals at work.
These KEFs have something of a reputation, and this is the 5th iteration of the LS series model based upon the original design. So we had the original passive LS50, then the LS50 wireless, which was an active model, well it still is, then the baby LSX actives, which I've reviewed before, and then LS50 wireless 2, and then this new Meta passive model, although I think the Metas and the LS50 wireless 2 might have been released at the same time. The original LS50 came out in KEF's 50th anniversary year in 2011, and it's always been something of a kind of top trumper in audiophile circles at decent, but not extortionate type prices. And if you look at credible magazines and review sites, ones that say it as it is or those that let you read between the lines, it's often regarded as a class-leading speaker in its category and price. And I'm not bigging them up for the sake of bigging them up, because I actually bought these and I know how good they are based on the original LS50s and listening to these Metas many times myself at dealers. Now this is a pretty simple design with the front Uni-Q driver, which is KEF's patented combined tweeter and mid-bass driver in one kind of handful, but which has this inner treble waveguide to disperse sound. Around the back you're going to notice the 4mm binding posts. Obviously it's not a bi-wireable design, so a single set, and a rear bass port because it's a bass reflex speaker. You'll notice that the shape of the port is different to the original LS50, and the ports can be bunged up according to the distance from walls, as the manual diagrams will show you. Obviously more bunging, if that's not too technical a term, the closer to walls, the less bunging the further away from walls. The underside screw mounting points are obviously for stands, so you could use KEF's S2 stands. The pair I have here, I should say, is in the royal blue model, which don't they look fantastic with that contrasting gold and blue colouring. You can also get them in mineral white, carbon black and titanium grey, where the driver colours differ according to the model you choose. But I just think the design of these speakers is absolutely terrific. They look like some sort of museum piece, or what a Bond villain might have in their lair. Considering their size, weight is actually quite hefty, and it does give the impression that they are made of metal with their brushed metal surface effect. Also solidity, because when you tap the top they are rock solid. In fact, it's an MDF case which is braced internally, both horizontally and vertically. Also, it's important to say that the front bezel is made from a glass fibre and polyester compound, which is probably for reasons of noise damping. This speaker is stiff when you play music at modest levels, so you won't get much cabinet coloration. That's the cabinet producing sound from vibrating. Also, KEF use what they call constrained layer damping, which basically means adding damping between parts of the speaker that move and those that sit still. The most obvious thing to give it away as the new Meta variant is the front livery text and the different rear port shape, as I've alluded to. Before we go into a description of what metamaterials are, here are some specs. What made me laugh about the name of these speakers initially with my funny, weird, warped imagination is meta. It sounds like a trendy adolescent colloquialism, you know, these speakers aren't ream or sick, but they're totally meta. The dictionary definition, and chatting to KEF's Jack Oakley-Brown, it actually means beyond a normal made material, in other words a man-made material. This is interesting because KEF are the first to use metamaterial technology in speakers, I believe, and what they basically are is materials that change the properties of sound waves or light rays by the structure and physical makeup. So for instance, in glasses you could change refraction of a lens by a thick curved shape, or you could do so by a thinner, flatter plastic but using the material properties of the plastic itself. In these speakers there's a disc with a maze-like structure that refracts sounds along its path, so absorbing some frequencies the designers don't want being reflected back that naturally come off the rear of the driver and back to the listener from the cabinet.
Handmade chocolates, and see how they get their straight line finish one by one. No wonder they cost the earth.
I tried with my Hegel H390, and you might be thinking that's overkill, Simon, but I wanted to hear what these speakers could do, and with that combination I did hear what these speakers could do, and I'd say that the initial sense is more sound than a speaker this size should produce. I've used the analogy before, you know, more sound than they have any God-given right, and that's definitely true here. But what they have is a depth perspective that puts all the instruments into kind of demarcated points along the listening plane, and this is the Uni-Q doing its stuff, I think, because of the known dispersive capabilities of Uni-Q, the way that the mid-bass sound is integrated with the treble sound and the bass sound as well, but the way that it all comes at you all at once. So for anyone coming from conventional speaker designs, I think you're going to notice this as a standout trait. I'm not used to Uni-Q, but it was pretty obvious that this is, you know, a characteristic of this speaker. Also, depending what price you come from too. I'm not going to say that this is a massive change with Uni-Q, but it's a good reason why these speakers make sense for decently sized rooms where you just want dispersion from a small footprint. I concentrate on the standout traits in hi-fi reviews as I want to know what they mainly do, and I think that's the same for consumers as well. Often hi-fi reviews get caught in over-pretentious language and over-information in describing sonic qualities of products, so you don't get a sense of the main character as to what the product does. Another one for these KEF LS50 metas is that they produce more detail than they should do for the money, which if you're used to listening to more expensive designs like me, it would be really easy to miss. Also, this is a decently rounded speaker, nothing nasty with treble, but it's also very neutral, slightly rolled off in the highest frequencies, something I wasn't quite expecting, to be honest, because the original LS50s are definitely a more, how can we say it, kind of bitingly incisive speaker, I think is the best way. Metal dome tweeters like those used in the original LS50 and these metas can be harsh with treble, but it's not the case in the LS50 design at all. Bass is definitely not as tight as PMC speakers, but they're probably one of the class leaders with their transmission line designs too, plus more expensive, so I'm definitely not making any comparisons there. I would say that these KEFs do need a bit of space with the rear ports, and I think they'd be great for open apartments. I'm going to be trying with different amps and trying out their position long ways in the room, which acoustically I think is always a good idea if you can do it. Okay, it's not a full range speaker going down to 47 Hz, with bass in the audible range going as low as 20 Hz. But I think there are two schools of thought over whether you want to augment the bass from small satellite speakers like these KEFs, which are, let's face it, good already. Lots of that is going to come down to bass integration and personal taste, but these speakers, a fair few number of users use with subs. And if you go on the KEF LS50 forum on Facebook, you can see that, as I did as part of this review. Sometimes you can get speakers of a similar design in the range that have totally different character to one another, but that's not the case here because these Metas have a similar sonic character in dispersion and bass and treble balance to KEF's LSX active mini monitors, which is a shrunk down version of the LS50 Metas, but with Class D amps included and streaming integration as well. So you're definitely not going to want to be playing these Metas gut-wrenchingly loud, as they'll start to struggle at volume. But then the driver's only 5¼ inches, and you know there's limits in physics as to what's possible. Bass isn't as class leading as much more expensive designs, but this is a £1,000, €1,200, $1,500 pair of speakers, and you wouldn't expect this to be. I think you're going to need a really gutsy amp, but so long as you place them well and match them with a really good amp, I think you're going to be fine. I found that the high damping factor of Hagel amps seems to work wonders. This is the measure of how quickly the drivers start and stop, so they don't kind of flab around to cause that woolly undefined bass that some amps produce. You need that gutsy amplifier here because the KEFs are rated at only 85 decibels sensitivity and a minimum load impedance of 3.5 ohms. Another thing is the Metas are pretty responsive to different electronics, so when I tried my Chord Cutis DAC and the RME ADI2 DAC FS I have, the two DACs were pretty easy to discern apart. I'm going to be matching these speakers to more price appropriate amps, and I do have an NAD M10 Class D integrated streaming amp coming. Unfortunately, it's due to arrive just after I finish this film, always the case, but I'll be mentioning more about the pairing in the next film on the NAD, so do watch this space.
This is the age of motorways that cut across England, speeding the traffic. The M1, for example, stretching for 75 miles north from London.
Of the speakers I've reviewed so far around these KEFs price, these LS50 Metas are definitely my pick. Neat's Iota Alpha 2.5 way floor standing speakers are a possible alternate because they have a similar footprint. A little bit more expensive in the UK, but they don't have a combination of that same all-out fore and aft soundstage depth and the bass and treble balance of these LS50 Metas. However, the Neats do have it over the KEFs with widthways dispersion from their ribbon tweeters and a more biting and searing treble. Also, the Neats have that preciseness in treble and a level of seamless coordination in the frequency bands that you tend to get with 2.5 way or 3-way speakers. And whilst not quite as easy a listen to these KEFs, it's a tough call to say which is the better sonically. If pushed, I think I'd say most would like the KEFs more because they have that more neutral character that most audio lovers get accustomed to from either listening to budget hi-fi, which is more kind of joined up in bass, so giving a preference for a more rounded sound, or appreciating neutrality more as you become an audiophile, or if you are an audiophile. I tend to slightly prefer something without the rolled off top treble these KEFs have, but that far from means I can't live with them or they aren't musical. The $1,000 Definitive Technology Demand D11s are obviously a more dispersive speaker with their passive radiator, bigger drivers and the dispersing waveguide that you can see on the front. So they're going to suit a bigger room, louder listening experience with a bigger soundstage. Still very good speakers, relatively speaking, but they don't have the detail and accuracy or on-off dynamic capability of these KEFs or the Neats, which is something we're all sensitive to. So regrettably, they aren't the same detail dynamic proposition for medium small room listening. You know, different strokes for different folks. Different speakers suit different needs.
Enjoy the music for a minute before we let personality Eric Robinson explain.
Hello there. I suppose you thought you were listening to a long playing record just then. Well, you weren't. You were listening to a new instrument.
Take an already great product in the LS50, so many commendations and featuring in best of lists, but on top of that, add constant redesign of the UniQ drivers. I think these are on like the 12th iteration, and unlike now that's what I call music compilations, you remember those? These seem to get better and better listening to these against the LS50. So what I'm saying is that when you add all this up and factor in £1,000 or equivalent price, you're getting an awful lot for your money, especially adding in brilliant sonics. So these are extremely good value for money. And I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to shit a product or make a product good that isn't good, but this is why, this is a terrific product. And I'm an enthusiast, so when I come across such a product, I'm obviously gonna say it's good. This is kind of like audiophile hi-fi you'd advocate to someone who hasn't gone there before, but where you get awesome speakers at a relatively modest price level, where you might not even want to consider going higher, higher in inverted commas. So the idea of these speakers being a kind of all you need for true audiophile hi-fi is extremely true. The fact that I'm even sussing their downsides against my own PMC's treble the money, sorry, no pun intended there, that says a lot for how they punch hard as heavyweights at welterweight prices. I'd say that if bass was a little tighter and you aren't concerned with all-out punch and volume, you want something reined in with the treble, a touch, then sonically they'd challenge speakers like the PMC 2523 I reviewed easily. By the way, there are some serious discounts on the old model at the moment, which make them a seriously good buy. I saw one guy write on a forum that they are the deal of the century, which I think is really, really apt. The reputation of these Metas though does live up on home listening. They're terrific speakers that put a big grin on your face, and they honestly get my mark of approval. These speakers are frankly why I do this. Oh, and the creative side too.